Do you have enough power available to run all the equipment you want to use on your boat? Here's how to figure this out. Hi there, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I'll share some simple calculations to ensure you have the right amount of power you need when you need it. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Mantis Marine, makers of the Mantis Anchor, now available in models with and without a roll bar. Proven to set reliably in the most challenging bottoms, the Mantis Anchor digs in like no other, making anchoring safer and boating more enjoyable. Mantis Marine brings to market practical, durable, and affordable marine products, including their anchoring gear, some scuba diving accessories, a rechargeable waterproof headlamp, and wonderful solar charging navigation light. Visit mantismarine.com and see for yourself. Okay, let's talk about calculating your boat's power requirements. One of the most common questions for new cruisers is how much electricity it really takes to live comfortably on a boat. You might think you've got it all figured out, plenty of batteries, maybe a solar panel or two, and then you add one more gadget and it just all comes crashing down. That's why knowing how to calculate your boat power requirements is so important. It keeps you from being caught short, especially in the summer heat when everything from fans to coolers to water makers might be running. Back when Dave and I started cruising in 2002, we learned very quickly that having enough power is the difference between comfortable, sustainable cruising and feeling like you're always rationing energy. We leaned towards low power draw solutions where we could. In fact, one of my motivations for starting the Boat Galley back in 2010 was to share real numbers on how much power different galley appliances used, ways to cook without them if you didn't want to run your batteries down. But even with that mindset, it can be tricky to figure out how much power a given device will actually use. So let's walk through the process. If a gadget already runs on 12 volts and the label lists amps, the math is easy. You just multiply the amps by the number of hours you expect to run it. My Caframo fan, for example, draws 1 amp on 12 volt. If I run it 24 hours a day, that's 24 amp hours. Simple. Sometimes the label lists watts instead of amps. That takes an extra step, but it's not hard. You just divide the watts by 12 to convert it to amps, then multiply by hours of use. My mattress cooler was rated at 8 watts. Divide by 12, you get about 2/3 of an amp. Multiply that by 8 hours of nightly use, and the total comes out to just over 5 amp hours. Now then, there are the devices that run on regular household current, 110 or 120 volts here in the US. It takes a little bit more math. If you know how many amps the label says, just multiply by 10 to get the approximate 12-volt draw when it runs through your inverter. I always round up because inverters aren't perfectly efficient. That gives you a decent estimate of what the gadget is going to cost you in amp hours. Now, once you've figured out the power draw, the next step is to compare it against what you have available. Start with your total battery capacity. Then ask how much of that is usable. Basically, half of it if you've got lead-acid batteries, or about 80% if you've switched to lithium. From there, you can look at your daily cycle. How much you're already using, how quickly do you replace it. Solar panels, wind generators, your alternator, even a portable generator all play a role in that. That's where a good battery monitor is worth its weight in gold. It's like a bank statement for your energy. You can see what's coming in, what's going out, and what's left. So let's say you're fully charged by late morning, and you don't use all that energy up. Then you might benefit from more battery capacity to store the excess that you're producing during the day. Now, on the other hand, if you're never getting your batteries back to full, except by plugging into shore power or running a generator, you'll want to focus on adding more charging power, whether it's solar, wind, or just plan to run your generator more. Sometimes it helps to hear some real-world examples because the numbers can kind of feel abstract until you compare them. Let's look at a laptop computer. It probably draws 4 or 5 amps, 12 volt when it's charging. So if you're working on it for 3 or 4 hours a day, that's 15 to 20 amp hours. Now, your typical 12-volt refrigerator, especially in hot weather, can use close to 100 amp hours in a day. It's going to run virtually all the time. Your anchor light may be one of the smallest draws. If it's LED, figure 1 amp or less for, say, 10 hours overnight. Call it 10 amp hours. Stack all of those things together with the fans, the pumps, other gadgets, and you can see how it starts adding up. Now, everyone has different priorities for what it's worth spending those amp hours on. For Dave and I, our non-negotiables were lights, refrigeration, fans, and plenty of capacity for computers and electronics. We also had a rechargeable vacuum and, when needed, our water maker. On one boat, our water maker ran off 12 volt, on the other, it ran off the generator. Now, our system included 300 amp hours of lithium batteries, almost 500 watts of solar, and then a Honda generator we mostly used in the winter when the days were short and the sun was low. And, the alternator helped anytime we were motoring. Now, that setup all worked for our lifestyle, but it might not at all for you. And that's the real point. Every new gadget is like a line item in your energy budget. Before you buy it, you have to figure out how many amp hours it's going to cost you. Then you can decide whether you can afford it with what you have or whether you need to increase either more charging power or the storage with more batteries. If you think about power like that, either you've got to have enough for it already, or you've got to have more storage for the power that is coming in, or be able to generate more power, then you're going to make good decisions. Okay, that's it for this episode, and thanks for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. Hopefully you learned something useful. Please tell others about us, and keep listening. Get a subscription.